Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the first time I've done a on location video for a while, and I've chosen to come down to a place in Dorset called Littlebredy, where there is a waterfall. Not a big waterfall, but for Dorset it's quite a big waterfall. And I got here a bit early. It's about 20 minutes before sunrise. I was hoping for a bit of mist because on the drive down here there was some mist on the road, but it doesn't appear to be that much around. But anyway, the main focus today really was to capture the waterfall, and because we're in autumn now here in the UK, there's a lovely acer tree beside it. I'll put up some b-roll of this scene, and it's nothing new. Everyone's been here, everyone's photographed it. It's a very popular place. The locals have put measures in place to try and limit people parking like stupid people. And anyway, I found a respectful place to park, and I've come here today as I said. Right, so what am I intending to do? And I know people refer to this sometimes as the thief of joy, but I brought 3 cameras with me: a full frame camera, the Canon R8 that I'm using at the moment, my ancient Olympus EM1, which is my 4/3 camera, and I've also bought my Fujifilm X-E1, which is an APS-C size sensor camera. And I'm basically going to shoot the scene with all 3 cameras and have a look at the results. This is partly for fun, and it's also partly as well to give me some insights as to what to do next, because I've been using the Canon R8 now for a number of months, and even though undeniably that is the best action camera I've ever used, it's much better than the Sony A9 that I had in terms of tracking my small furry dog running towards me. It definitely, the hit rate and the tracking ability is definitely much better than that camera and any other camera that I've tried. The only thing I'm not convinced about yet with the Canon R8 is its use for me for other types of photography. There were a couple of things about it particularly that I'm not going to get to too much today in this video, but suffice to say that I'm not a massive fan of the colours that this camera produces. It takes quite a while in Lightroom for me to adjust the images to suit my taste, so it does take a little bit of work in Lightroom. And even though the Sony A9 colours were different, I just found them a little bit more neutral perhaps to the Canons, which to me comes over a little bit too sickly sweet. And yeah, so I'm not a massive fan of the colours of the Canon R8. Furthermore as well, I went to Dartmoor last week, and whilst I was really happy with the compositions I was able to find, because it was a holiday after all, not like a specific photography trip, but when I got the images back on the computer and started looking at them, I wasn't massively impressed with the focus and the sharpness I was able to achieve on some of the subjects. So I was a little bit underwhelmed. So it kind of got me thinking whether there was something wrong with the lens. I was using the 24-70 f4 Canon EF lens, and I know that's quite an oldish lens at the moment. So I did some tests. Cat's just appeared. I did some tests with that lens in the week. I compared it against my really old 28-105 Canon EF lens, as well as using the 24-70 with and without the stabilization turned on, and my conclusions were that the lens was actually performing as well as my 28-105, and it definitely did help to have the stabilization on in terms of achieving those. There's a cat down here. Hello. No idea who the cat is. Anyway, back to the thing. Yeah, so I'm content that the 24-70 is working fine. It's just perhaps, maybe for me, it's just not the sharpest tool in the box. Like I had the 85mm f1.8 with me as well, which I used to film my action shots more and for portraiture, and that is definitely a sharp lens. You know, I've got no complaints with that lens. It's just that the 24-70 on the Canon R8 for me is a little bit underwhelming, I guess. I guess maybe I've been spoiled by the Olympus 12-40 f2.8 Pro. Maybe that is a sharp lens, and the zooms on full frame cameras have to be very expensive and heavy to achieve that same level of sharpness. But anyway, that's why I've bought the 12-40 with me today for my Olympus, and likewise as well I've bought the 35mm f1.8 for my Fuji, which is admittedly my only Fuji lens, but it's a sharp lens as well. So I'm hoping I'll be able to use that against the 24-70 of the Canon, as well as what I'm using to film this on as well, which is the Tamron 17-35, which, yeah, so it'd just be interested for me just to see whether, yeah, it's just going to help me decide whether I'm happy with the Canon R8 for all types of photography, or whether I can see value in maybe trying an OM1 for action and then going for a different full frame camera for more landscape and other types of photography genres. Anyway, I think I've rabbited on enough. I'm trying desperately not to miss any decent light, but as you can see probably behind me, it's a little bit grey. Ironically, I've got no signal down here, so I can't check my notes that I carefully curated last night. But anyway, I'll relocate to the waterfall because it's definitely getting lighter, and I'll try and find a composition, and I'll talk to you in a minute. Whoa, there's a cat behind me. What a crazy cat. Hello. Look it down. It's a circus performer. Anyway, see you in a bit. Yeah, I don't think I've got anything else to say here. Like I said, I'm going to take images with 3 different cameras. So I've got the Canon R8 set up for vlogging with the 17-35 and the Canon 24-70, and I've also got my Olympus EM1 and the 12-40 2.8 Pro. This cat is annoying. And as I said, I've got my trusty old Fujifilm X-T1 and 35mm f1.4. So yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to say here. What I'll do now is I'll put up the images I've been able to capture this morning, and then I'll talk to you more. Wacky cat. And maybe it's something the locals released down here to deter photographers from capturing this scene again. But anyway, yeah, I'll talk to you back at the office when I can go through the results and just talk about maybe the differences in sharpness between the sensors, because I'm going to try and obviously match the focal length of the composition as best I can, and also try and match the depth of field as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the different size sensors pull this scene off. So see you in a bit. Wait, you? Right, I haven't put the results up just yet because I feel that I need to explain a couple of things that only really occurred to me when I started processing the images at home away from that crazy cat. And I made a bit of a boo-boo, really, because whilst I was trying to capture the same depth of field, whether I was using my full frame camera, my Micro Four Thirds camera, or my APS-C Fuji X-T1 here, what that meant is that certainly for the full frame camera, I needed to use a smaller aperture to get more depth of field, and that of course had an impact on the shutter speed that I needed in order to expose the scene. And of course, if you're used to shooting things that move like trees and leaves, the shutter speed can have a massive effect on whether that foliage is sharp or whether it's blurred. And that is in essence why those comparisons are a little bit difficult to compare fairly. But what you can compare, and what I do and what I have compared, is the differences in the way that the cameras have rendered the scene in terms of the colours, as well as the sharpness on the things that don't move in the scene, so like the tree trunk and the rocks. Another problem as well that I didn't appreciate again until I got home was the fact that I left the polarizer on my Olympus. And I'll just put up these examples now where you can see the differences between having a polarizer on and off the camera when you're shooting a scene like this. This is the scene, the general scene that I shot, and then I also did a close-up of the actual waterfall, and you can see the polarizer effect a lot clearer here. And I don't particularly dislike any image. I think they've both got their strengths. I almost feel like without the polarizer, it feels a bit more dramatic with the rushing water, whereas obviously it's nice with the polarizer to be able to see through the water. So I think that the images both work. They're just different. But of course, because I left the polarizer on, when I'm trying to compare the renderings of the three cameras that I used, it is difficult to do that fairly. But I'll give it a go. Let's dive into some of the comparisons, and I will try to draw some conclusions that I've made from the day that I was down in Littlebredy. Right, so just looking at the first two images here, I'll just put them up side by side. But basically the one on the left was taken with the Tamron 17-35 attached to the Canon, and then on the one on the right was the same composition, same settings, pretty much, with the Canon EF 24-70mm f4. And I did a few of these comparisons, and my conclusions were the fact that they were very, very similar in sharpness, and I would just have to give it to the Canon lens overall. It just seems to have a little bit of a better rendering, a bit warmer. It's probably really hard to see over YouTube, but I just find that it has a slightly more pleasing straight out of camera kind of look. I'm sure with a bit of work you can get the Tamron probably looking just as good or the same. Right, so this is the out of camera Canon image using the 24-70, and if I'm honest, I absolutely hate the colours that the Canon has delivered here, but with a few tweaks I've managed to tone the colour down to something like that. So then if we go over to the Olympus image, so again this is the straight out of camera image, and this is using a polarizer as well, so there are subtleties in that, and then I have edited it to that. Again, I've just toned down the colours to give, so it's easier to see the spread of tones in those leaves of this particular acer tree. So that was the original one, and that's my final edited version for the Olympus camera. Right, so this is the original Fujifilm RAW file. No polarizer, just straight out using the excellent 35mm f1.4, and then this is the final edited version. And out of the three images that I took, I definitely preferred the image that I got from the Fujifilm camera. Yeah, so here's the final edited versions. So the Fujifilm on the left, the Canon on the right, and then the Olympus on the right again. And even looking at this now, I just much prefer the final image that I was able to achieve with the Fujifilm camera. Even though the colours sometimes I find with Fuji don't feel real, there is something very special about the way it renders images. If I just hone in on the actual JPEG a minute and zoom in, I just think when I compare, it just feels, the rendering on the Fujifilm cameras, they just feel a little bit more natural, more organic feeling, whereas the other cameras I tended to find they looked more digital. Yeah, it's hard to show, and it probably doesn't come across that well in the compressed YouTube video, but there's just something about the Fujifilm files that just peak it above the other cameras. Don't get me wrong, if Fujifilm got their act together with autofocus, I would probably be giving them a shot next. But as it is, I don't think their autofocus can compete with the likes of Sony or Canon or even Olympus. So I'll probably just for the time being stick with my Fujifilm X-E1 35mm f1.4 lens here, and I am seriously tempted to maybe pick up another lens, maybe the 60mm f2.4 macro. Again, that's another lens like the 35mm that is supposed to have some special sauce when it comes to its rendering. So for the low price of that lens, it's certainly something I'm going to be looking to pick up for the Fujifilm X-E1 in the future. It was hard to draw any conclusion from the Olympus files because they had a polarizer fitted most of the time, and but the colours did come across quite pleasing. And the Canon files, whilst I think straight out of camera they were probably the least light from my point of view, but the one good thing with the Canon files is that you can push that raw file extremely hard and get eventually the results that you're looking for. And I know this for a fact because when I was driving home from Littlebredy, I pulled into some other places along the way that were on my list to take a look at, and the light was a lot better in those places than it was down in Littlebredy. And I've just put up the images now while I'm talking about them. And it's ironic because when I started this video, I mentioned that I was having issues with the Canon and with the 24 to 70, and that I struggled to get consistent sharp results with it. Yeah, I arrived at this location, shot at f16 into the sun, and the image is pin sharp where I need it to be. And the dynamic range that I was able to recover and some of the editing that I was able to put into the image have really made it come alive. But then it sure as shit, the very next image that I took, which is this one here, and I was focusing here on this structure here, and it's soft and not particularly sharp, even though we're at 1/250th of a second. So that's what I do find with Canon. I'm still struggling, certainly in single autofocus mode, to get consistently sharp images. So where does that leave me, really? Going back to the title of this video, the Canon R8 Conundrum. The Canon R8 is amazing in terms of focusing on, let's say, slow-moving subjects like people. With its servo autofocus, it is absolutely brilliant, and for the most part, it is very, very good at tracking my dog running around and towards me. It's certainly much better than the Sony A9 I had, but there is something that I just can't shake at the moment, and that's whether to try an Olympus OM1. And the reason I say try is because the one area that is frustrating me a little bit is with the Canon R8, when, like for instance, my dog is running towards me, there is a point that I find that the camera really starts to struggle to keep the subject in focus, and that's before that the subject reaches the minimum focus distance of the lens. So there's this period when the subject starts to fill the composition that I do find the camera starts to struggle to keep that subject in focus. So what I'm left with having to do is crop my photos down using images that were a further point away in the sequence. So whilst that's okay, I do feel like I'm missing some of the more expressive positions she gets into as she gets close to me. So that's led me down this way of thinking whether the Olympus OM1 can do a better job in this area. So I think until I've tested that theory out, I will postpone the purchase of any more lenses from my Canon R8 and keep on the lookout for an OM1. I know a lot of people, when I've asked for recommendation on what lenses to get for the Canon, literally I think at the top of everyone's list is a 70 to 200 f2.8, but there's some issues with that in terms of the fact that if I get it for the EF mount, it's way too heavy for me. Like, I borrowed a 70 to 300 L lens the other day, and that was probably pushing what I'm comfortable taking out, and I think that one weighs with the adapter probably about 1.1 kilograms, whereas the EF 70 to 200 f2.8 is 1.6 kilograms. So that's way too heavy for me. So yes, you could get the RF 70 to 200 f2.8 lens, but I think I would have to take out a small mortgage in order to afford that lens. So that's why I feel that it might be a cheaper option at the moment, just to try the OM1 to see whether it's at least as good, if not better, than the R8 at my specific case that I'm looking for at the moment in terms of capturing my dog running towards me, and at that point where she is more expressive. So that's not like at the start of the run or during the run. That's literally as she is approaching her owner and the snacks that she's running to me to get. Yeah, so that's where I am at the moment with the Canon R8. I just feel like in the action department, whether the OM1 could do better, and then that would then help inform what I do next. Because if the OM1 is better, or at least equivalent, that might then decide whether I want to ditch Canon and try another full frame system for everything other than action photography. Yeah, so I've rabbited on enough. This video is probably too long again, but that's the way it is. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.